A robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, you thought you'd heard the last of Partygate, now it's Beergate, and Sir Keir Starmer being very evasive indeed. What does it all mean? Do you care? Are they all as bad as each other? We'll look at tomorrow's local elections taking place right across the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. What will it all mean for the party leaders? And joining me on Talking Pints, an American journalist who exposed Hunter Biden only to be shut down by the giants of Silicon Valley. We'll talk about that, and could Elon Musk be a saviour? But before all of that, let's get the news.
Good evening, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says he's confident he has the right agenda for the country as he faced questions over the cost of living. The Prime Minister insists the UK is better placed than it was during the economic crises of the 80s and 90s. It says the cost of our food shop went up 3.5% last month, according to the latest figures from the British Retail Consortium.
The best future for the country is get through the tough patch that we have now, support people in any way that we can. But remember, this is we're now seeing a lot of employment and people in high-wage, high-skilled jobs. That's a much better position to be in than we were in the 1980s or 1990s.
The government says it will not appeal a court decision saying it had acted unlawfully by moving elderly patients from hospitals to care homes during the COVID-19 pandemic. Last month, a judicial review launched by the families of 2 care home residents who died of the virus found that several of the policies on moving patients from hospitals to care homes had been introduced unlawfully. Ukraine's defence ministry says Russia is attempting to increase its offensive in the east of the country. Kiev says Moscow's artillery fire and airstrikes are continuing on steelworks in Mariupol, where hundreds of people are still believed to be sheltering in bunkers. In Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, Russian shelling has bombarded an amusement park, with one woman suffering shrapnel wounds. Ukraine's defence says the Kremlin had conducted nearly 50 airstrikes already this week.
The Russian military command is attempting to increase the tempo of its offensive operation in eastern Ukraine. To this end, the enemy is conducting a regrouping and reinforcing of its troops and is building up its system of fire attack and material technical support.
Russian businesses are being banned from using British accountants under new sanctions. The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says the measures are designed to cut off access to the UK service industry, which Russians heavily rely on. Meanwhile, the EU will stop importing Russian oil as part of a 6th sanctions package against Moscow. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen says crude oil supplies will be phased out in 6 months and refined products by the end of the year. The shirt worn by Diego Maradona when he scored 2 of the most famous goals in football history has been sold for a record £7.1 million. He wore Argentina's number 10 shirt in the 1986 World Cup quarter-final against England in Mexico. He scored 6 minutes into the second half in what would become known as the Hand of God goal. England midfielder Steve Hodge kept the shirt after the match and put it up for auction. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Nigel.
Good evening. Many of you thought you'd heard the last of Partygate. It was beginning to bore you. Others, I know, had been incensed by it. But now it's all changed. The tables have turned, or have they? It's Beergate. Yes, it's that get-together in an office in Durham that took place during elections last year. Now, we saw photographs taken through the window of Sir Keir Starmer. He's insisted throughout the last few months that it was simply a work event and just a few people in a room. But it turns out that £200 of takeaway curry was ordered. It turns out there were quite a lot of people there. It turns out claims that afterwards they all went back to work just aren't true, according to a couple of witnesses. And over the last 2 days, when Sir Keir Starmer's been interviewed on this, he has been evasive, to say the least. Asked, has he been contacted by Durham Police since more revelations? There is no answer. Asked how many people were at the party, and he has no answer. Now, I do understand he doesn't want to get caught in the trap of being seen to lie, which certainly is an accusation we could level at a senior party figure who's alleged that Angela Rayner was not at the event when it turns out that she was. Was it just a get-together for 30 people, or was it a booze-up involving local activists that went on for some hours? All I can say for certain is, whether you're bored with this or not, it is Sir Keir Starmer that has got up repeatedly, week after week, in the House of Commons as the paragon of virtue, the man setting the standards by which public servants in this country should live. And when it comes to him being questioned about his own actions, he is, as I say, evasive. It all makes me wonder, are they both, in effect, as bad as each other? Tell me what you think. Farage at gbnews.uk. Now, I'm not for one moment suggesting that if you've got elections going on in your area tomorrow that you shouldn't vote. I'm just saying that standards in public life don't appear to be very good. Why not just fess up? Why not just say, you know what, we've been out campaigning for day after day, it was Friday night, it was ahead of a bank holiday weekend, and yes, we had a few drinks. Because I think actually the truth is most of us broke lockdown rules in some way. We just want, I think, a little bit more honesty. Now, let's recap what is happening across the United Kingdom tomorrow, because it is, in terms of size, really quite big. And joining me now is GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, give us a brief on what's happening across the UK, please.
Well, Nigel, millions of voters in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are going to go to the polls tomorrow. In England, it is not that every single council seat in the country is up for grabs. For example, here in Sunderland and indeed in most of the North East, it's only a third of seats. And actually, many of the seats, over half of them, will be fought in the capital in London. Whereas in Scotland and Wales, every council seat is up for grabs. And crucially, and possibly the most important election actually, will take place in Northern Ireland, Nigel, where the entire Northern Irish Assembly is up for election, 90 MLAs. That will be crucial, potentially an historic shift there in Northern Ireland, when it's likely that Sinn Féin will for the first time be the largest party and could secure the First Minister's position.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, it is a very significant election in Northern Ireland, but tell me, in terms of these elections, what do you think the significance is for Johnson, Starmer, and perhaps even the Liberal Democrats?
Well, in many ways, there's actually an awful lot of pressure on all of them. Certainly, at least Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer. What do I say that? Well, it's interesting. It's always interesting, isn't it, to find out where the leaders have been campaigning on the last day. Boris Johnson today was in Eastleigh, near Southampton, in Hampshire. Now, that is a Conservative seat, but it used to be Liberal Democrat. And there is concern, not about the red wall here in the north in the Conservative Party, but about what's going to happen in the south and potentially some of their supporters drifting to the Liberal Democrats. The government is going to lose seats, there's no doubt about that. It's pretty normal. It's a midterm election. Governments get a kicking at Nigel. It's the scale of the defeat, I think, for the Conservatives that could get Boris Johnson into trouble if it's a really, really bad day for the Prime Minister. But there's pressure on Keir Starmer too. He was in Wakefield today. There's going to be a by-election there very soon. Labour need to win places like Wakefield if they've got any chance of convincing anyone that they can win the next election. If Labour don't do well there, or indeed here in Sunderland, where it's possible they might lose control of the council, many people would say trying to overturn that 80-seat majority is nigh impossible. So, as always with these things, it's local issues, but it's a national narrative, and depending on the results, the pressure could pile on either leader over the weekend, and that really could set up our politics in the months to come. It really could affect what happens internally within those political parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Darren, thank you very much indeed for that. And some of us will stay up late tomorrow night to get the results, but most of them, the most significant results, will come through late morning, lunchtime on Friday. Now, let's get into the prediction game of how many seats are going to be won or lost. And I'm joined by James Johnson from JL Partners, a former special advisor to Theresa May, an all-round polling expert. James, good evening. Welcome to the programme. So let's get straight to it. How many seats are the Conservatives going to lose?
The predicting game, a difficult one for pollsters, of course. No one's ever been burnt on that one before. I think we are going to see Conservatives seat losses. Look, the simple answer is polling local elections is a bit of a mug's game because the turnout varies so much. And obviously the people are voting on local issues. Some areas aren't fully voting. Others are not. And I think what we've got to think about there is effectively, when you get a larger swing against the Conservatives in some of these areas, particularly in the south, we might see some significant seat losses. So I think we might see in the hundreds. If we see above 300 losses for the Conservatives, that will be really worrying for Boris Johnson.
Yeah, it would. And as we say, there's pressure on the Labour Party too. Tell me, from your polling, how significant has Partygate been? And I know it's early to say, but if it has been significant, and if it has been damaging the Conservatives, does Beergate, and I accept it's one event we're talking about, not several, but does Beergate, to some extent, neutralise the damage that Partygate's done to the Tories on the basis that people just throw their hands up in the air and say a plague on both your houses?
So currently with this Beergate situation, it could take off, it could get more significant. One warning on all of this is, of course, in December, when the Partygate story for Boris Johnson first broke, it only took until mid-January that the public got really angry about it. So it could take off more. At the moment, though, I'm not seeing a big impact on public opinion. People who already dislike Keir Starmer strongly are very worked up about it and very incensed by it. But it's not lighting the public imagination so far in the way that it did with Boris Johnson earlier in the year. There was a YouGov poll asking whether people thought Keir Starmer had broken lockdown rules, and people said no more than yes, and that had barely changed since January. So certainly one to watch, but at the moment not really seeing it negating Boris Johnson's view. Obviously could lead to a lot of voters just sort of shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, they're all as bad as each other, aren't they? And I think that's, again, one of the key things to watch tomorrow, how many people actually stay at home, particularly on the Conservative side.
Yeah, well, there's a lot, some indications that up to half of people who voted Conservative in 2019 will stay at home. And for the Labour Party, that number is quite a lot lower. So you're right, turnout, who can be bothered, of course, very, very important. Just a final thought on this. You know, when we vote in our local district council, how much of our vote is determined on local issues as opposed to national issues? Or is this just an impossible question to answer?
Slightly depends on which election it is. I think mostly voters are pretty wise to what they're voting for. They know these are local council elections. They know these are things about things like bins and potholes, council tax. So I think largely local. But in the background, people always have the party and the national leader in mind. And I think that's why we saw, in the run-up to the 2010 election, we saw Labour do very badly in local elections. In the 90s, we saw the Conservatives do very badly in local elections. It was almost like people couldn't bring themselves to vote for the party locally because of their reputation nationally. And I think we might see the same thing a little bit tomorrow. Yes, people who might have traditionally voted Conservative on local issues like council tax, having in the back of their mind, do I still trust the leader and can I bring myself to come out in the current order that we're in? But yeah, I do think, ultimately these elections are about bins, and I think we're going to see that reflected too.
James Johnson, thank you very much indeed. So, does Beergate neutralise Partygate? Is Starmer damaged? John McTernan joins me, former political secretary, of course, to Tony Blair when he was Prime Minister. John, welcome to the programme. Starmer today, evasive, and that's perhaps a nice word to use, just absolutely stonewalling any question about whether the police had been in touch in Durham, completely ignoring questions about how many were at that event. It doesn't look very good, John, does it?
I think the issue was closed when the Durham police investigated it and said there was nothing to it. And the Tory politicians who are trying to pressurise the police to reopen an investigation they've held are kind of playing fast and loose with the rule of law. Either the police are independent or the government of the day tell them to go after their opponents. That feels much more like a third world country really than Britain, where Britain should be.
Well, I don't know about that, John. I think if we look at it initially, the Metropolitan Police weren't going to do anything about the number 10 parties, and later on, after more stories came out, they were. But the real question I'm putting to you is about Sir Keir Starmer himself. As I say, on a whole series of interviews over the course of the last couple of days, just point blank refusing to answer questions. And he has set himself up in many ways over the last few months at the dispatch box with his criticisms of Johnson, his accusations that Johnson is not telling the truth. He set himself up to be setting the standards in public life. He's not really living by them, is he?
Well, he's got his message across. He got his message across on Partygate, which was that there was something fishy there. He pushed and pushed until there was an investigation by the civil service. And it was actually the civil service investigation that triggered the Metropolitan Police. So in that sense, that was the system working. Question raised by a newspaper, question raised in the Commons, question goes to an investigation, investigation leads to the police. In this situation, he doesn't want to be taken off message. The message is cost of living, and we've seen the government stumble on cost of living. What was it the PM said? If you're a pensioner and you've got problem with your heating bills, get on the bus and travel around because the travel is free because of the generosity of the government and him particularly in London. Was it that it was the Environment Secretary, George Eustace, saying, well, people could budget better by choosing the no-brand items in the shop? I think the issue is this battle is going to be about cost of living. That's the only real issue. People decide on Partygate. I think that's what's reflected on what James
That may well be right, but let me just one last time put this point to you, that Keir Starmer has been trying to set the standards for public life, holding himself up to be virtuous and truthful, and he will not answer very simple, very straightforward questions about what happened in that room in Durham this time last year. I put it to you, John, that isn't really good enough.
Look, his office have answered. He's answered. The police have looked into it. They've cleared him.
No.
You don't.
John, no. John, he hasn't answered.
If you touch pitch, does it not defile you? Mud is being slung, and Keir is sticking to his soundbite, sticking to his message. And what gets clipped in?
He's sticking to his soundbites.
is the message he's putting across. And I reckon,
He's sticking to his sound bites. He's not answering. He's not answering straight questions, John. He's not answering straight, and nor are you. I'm just saying to you, is it unreasonable for Keir Starmer to be asked repeatedly today how many people were in that room? Is that an unreasonable question for the leader of the opposition?
It is unreasonable for him to be pestered and followed around with this question. His office have answered it, the cops have investigated it, and at some point this issue will die, and it will die either on the elections results tomorrow, or it will definitely die on the date of the Wakefield by-election, because the country has decided where it's going to go on this. It thinks Keir is worthy. It thinks Keir is a bit dull sometimes, but it thinks Keir is trustworthy, and it sees what he does within those things. It thought that the Prime Minister was a joker, thought he was fun and a lark, and then the country now thinks he was having a laugh at them. And those are very different situations. So does this damage the brand?
All of that,
as James said, I don't think so.
John, all of that may be true. All of that may be true. I thank you for coming on and talking to us. But I do finish by saying Keir Starmer has been highly, highly evasive. John, thank you. Well, there you are. You've had a robust defence there of Keir Starmer and Beergate. Have to say, I think Starmer has been very, very evasive, and that's not too impressive. In a moment, 15 years ago yesterday, little Madeleine McCann went missing. It now seems the police are onto a lead that might actually get us somewhere.
Millions of people across the UK are heading to the polls in a vital test of Boris Johnson's premiership. This isn't just about Westminster. These are local elections. A chance for you to decide how your community is run. We'll be talking to senior politicians, election analysts, our team of reporters around the country, and of course, to our team here in the studio. And we'll have comprehensive coverage of the elections to the Northern Irish Assembly. That's the UK Votes 2022 from 10 a.m. on Friday morning here on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
In the light of Beergate, I asked you, are they all as bad as each other? Well, some of your reactions that have come in. Adrian says, making a mockery of politics. Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Which one to choose? ? Zeus says, politics today is about personalities and personal lives, not politics. As long as they can do their job, I don't care. No one is perfect. No, and I'm sure many people would agree with that. But if you're not perfect, don't try and tell the country that actually you are. Another message. Conservatives urgently need new leadership and Labour are horrific. I think that qualifies as a plague on both your houses. Tammy says, I think they are mostly compromised. The problem is local elections don't really sell themselves. Most will just vote on the party they are affiliated with. None seem to have any real solutions or goals. I guess it depends, Tammy, what's in the mind of the voter. Are they thinking about the local issues? Are they thinking about the national issues? What is the mix? What is the balance between the two? Depends a bit, I guess, where you live. And Brian says, for the first time in my life, I won't be voting. I am disgusted with all the parties. None of them give two hoots for the less well off. Well, as I say, I do feel in many ways our politics is in quite a bad place. I think our politics, our whole system is in need of urgent, radical reform, absolutely from top to bottom. But hey, there's not time for that today. We'll do it another time. Now, I can't even believe it really, but it's 15 years ago yesterday that little Madeleine McCann went missing on the Algarve. It was a story that became an absolute national and international sensation. Right from the very start, there were some, I think, really serious doubts about the ways in which the Portuguese police had handled this investigation. And a very long campaign was fought by her parents, both of whom I met when I was a member of the European Parliament in Strasbourg, and I must say I felt deeply sorry for. But it does appear that some fresh evidence has emerged over the course of the last few days linking the disappearance of Madeleine McCann to a known, convicted German paedophile. Well, to bring us up to date with all of this is Charlie Hedges, MBE, and of course the former head of child exploitation and at the National Crime Agency. And Charlie, you're just about the best in the business at helping find missing persons, and thank you very much for joining us. Explain, please, to the audience what these new leads are.
Well, in any cold case such as this, which is 15 years old, it's a question of building the pieces, putting the building blocks together, creating the jigsaw puzzle to try and understand what's going on. Good, hard evidence is sometimes hard to find, so we may have to result on circumstantial. We seem to have some additional evidence that's come forward and linked with the change to the Aguila status for Christian B. It does tend to indicate we're heading in the right direction at last.
And this is something to do with fibres from night garments, yes?
That's right, yes, from the pink pyjamas that Madeleine was wearing on the night that she disappeared. It would appear that they found some of those fibres within the suspect's vehicle.
Right, OK. Well, that would sound like some pretty strong evidence. Question for you, Charlie. I said at the beginning of our conversation that there were, at least I harboured, I'm sure many others did, some pretty serious doubts about the ways in which the Portuguese police handled this. And if this new evidence of these fibres in Christian B's van that match up with Madeleine's nightclothes have just emerged, why has this all taken 15 years? What did the Portuguese police get wrong?
Well, I think what's critical in these cases is to be able to understand the circumstances, make a proper risk triage of the information to understand what we're doing, and then apply the right resources quickly. The longer it goes on, the harder it gets, the more difficult it is to tie things together. It's natural that one would look at the parents, because most abductions are by people known to the victim, but whether they're ruled in or ruled out, that's an important thing to do right from the outset. And gather the information, do the proper searches, do the proper investigations, and then you've got a real chance of being able to solve it.
And that's really my point. Did the Portuguese police do this properly?
Well, there are certainly questions over that, and a lot of criticism has been levelled at them, a lot of mudslinging and difficulty. Certainly one would have hoped that a more thorough and immediate investigation could have been done to establish exactly what had gone on, secure evidence, because that's a critical issue. If you don't secure the scene, the evidence gets contaminated or lost. So, yes, there are indications that things weren't done as expeditiously as they might have been. And
there was something about this case, wasn't there, Charlie, I don't know what it was, but something about this case that it just ran as a story, certainly in the British press, for year after year after year. And I guess it's because nobody was ever found. In cases like this, missing children, missing persons of any age, how uncommon is it for a body not to appear? How often do people just get abducted and are never seen again?
Unfortunately, it's rather more common than a lot of people would expect. Many cases are reported to the police every year, and there are, it's in the thousands, can be counted the number of cases that haven't been resolved. Some of those are because of a poor investigation to start off with, and some of them are just very difficult to explain. So Madeleine isn't completely an isolated case, but it has captured the imagination, the same as April Jones did when she went missing in the UK. That had a huge following, but was resolved fairly well. And that was a good example of how the police did a really good job, really supported the families, put every the effort into it, and although her body's never been found, we were able to bring a reasonable conclusion to the case for the sake of the family.
Charlie Hedges, thank you very much indeed for joining me here on GB News, and let's hope, for the sake, particularly of those parents, that we do get some finality, some proper end to this story, and some sense of justice. Now, moving on, it's time for the What the Farage moments that have taken place today. And absolutely at the top of my list is the extraordinary sale for £7.1 million. The shirt that was worn by Maradona, the Argentinian footballer, on that famous night where he described that goal himself as the hand of God. I won't tell you what Peter Shilton, the England footballer, said about it, but perhaps it wasn't quite as plied as that. It was just the most appalling act of gamesmanship, of cheating. It was cynical at the most appalling level. It's always hard when England lose, but to lose that way, in those circumstances, truly awful. And after the game, some players swapped shirts, and Steve Hodge, the England player, swapped his shirt. He got Maradona's shirt, and he's sat onto that shirt for years and years and years. He's had it out on loan to a museum, and now it's sold for an incredible £7.1 million. Amazing. And while we're talking about Argentina, today is the 40th anniversary of the sinking of HMS Sheffield in the Falklands War, seen as a reprisal attack using a French Exocet missile 2 or 3 days after the General Belgrano had been sunk. And I do remember, for those of us that were way too young to remember World War II, the incredible shock of a Royal Naval vessel going to the bottom of the ocean with a loss of life. Depressingly, it is a What the Farage moment, but perhaps it's not a surprise at all. And it's this: according to the World Health Organization, the report predicts that Britain will become the fattest nation in Europe by 2023. We will overtake Malta and Turkey, and we currently have between 25 and 30% of the British population who are dangerously overweight. And, yep, it's all to do with delivery apps. You go through any big city these days, you see these youngsters on bicycles and mopeds. I've no doubt before long it'll be electric scooters, and we seem to have become a nation of people addicted to takeaway food or pre-made food, high in all the wrong stuff, all the wrong fats, too much sugar, too much salt. We are becoming grossly overweight as a nation. The impact on our health is bad today, but given the sheer number of young people that are seriously overweight, goodness knows what future awaits in terms of diabetes and many, many other problems. And finally, and this really is a What the Farage shock, so there's about to be a press event premiere for the new Top Gun film, Maverick, which comes out very, very soon, and the RAF were invited to send along a face, and their advert ran like this: do you know of any pilot, preferably not a white male, who would like to be the RAF face at an event for the release of Top Gun 2. Appalling, divisive, self-defeating. I'm pleased to say the RAF bosses have now apologised for putting up that inappropriate advert. But it goes to show you this obsession with diversity actually goes way beyond promoting decency and fairness and starts to cause massive upset and insult to huge majorities of the population, regardless of their colour. Shame on you, the RAF, for getting that so badly wrong. Good, I guess, in the end, that you did choose to apologise. Now, some more thoughts, some more reactions on Beergate, on Starmer's absolute, complete, total evasiveness. Julian says, I am bored. Let's move on, please. Julian, I quite understand that. I know people have been bored by this, but it is happening, and you just can't have the leader of the opposition attacking the Tories, calling the Prime Minister a liar week after week after week, if his own standards do not match up to the rhetoric that he's used in public. And that is why it matters. That's why Partygate matters. It isn't the fact these events took place. It's the cover-ups, the evasion, the lies. That's what matters. I think what people want are straight-talking politicians who just once or twice put their hands up and say, sorry, I got it wrong. We can live with that. We can accept that. Bobby says, when Starmer and Rayner were tearing into Johnson, they knew they'd done the very same thing. The cynicism is beyond belief. Ryan says no. There are quite a few good politicians. Lee Anderson, David Davis, Lord Frost, Mark Francois, and you, Nigel. Well, I think I'm retired now, Ryan, but it's very sweet of you. And thank you. Chris says, the fact remains, Nigel, the police will not pursue Keir Starmer for a breach that appears no different to the Prime Minister and others arriving for a meeting and eating a slice of cake. Neither do they find Jeremy Corbyn when he was photographed at a dinner party, for which he apologised. The police are in danger of being accused of playing politics. Well, it has been said, it has been suggested that the police force, police and crime commissioners up in Durham, up in that part of the North East, are dominated by the Labour Party. Whether that's fair or not, who am I to judge? Anyway, we'll find out by Friday lunchtime what the impact of these local elections has been. Now, talking about being open, talking about putting before the public the facts so that they can establish for themselves what they believe to be true, what they believe to be right, just and fair. Something went very badly wrong in October 2020 in America. There was a laptop from Hunter Biden, the son of now President Joe Biden, that appeared with some extraordinary information on it. And Emma Jo Morris was responsible for getting this put on the front page of the New York Post, only to find that every social media channel and all the rest of mainstream media just not only denied the fact that the claims were there, did their best to literally obliterate it from public debate. And Emma Jo joins me in a minute for Talking Pints, and I'm going to ask, can Elon Musk put some of this right?
Coming up on The Mark Steyn Show, MP Sir Christopher Chope joins to discuss his sponsored vaccine damage bill. Are internet service providers now taking a leaf out of Twitter's book when it comes to censorship? Conservative woman editor Cathy Gingell has evidence to throw into the ring. Plus, as the EU debates further sanctions on Russian energy, we are joined by world-leading expert Professor Thane Gustafsson to discuss what this means for the geopolitical landscape and household bills. All that and more on The Mark Steyn Show at 8 o'clock.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, it's time for Talking Pints, and tonight it's a remote Talking Pints. I'm here in the United Kingdom, and Emma Jo Morris, who is the political editor of the Breitbart News Network, joins me from New York. Emma Jo, welcome to the programme. And I do have an American beer, I promise you.
Cheers. I'll
Cheers.
take your word for it.
Now... No, it is an American beer, and I'll have you know that there are quite a lot of American IPAs and other beers that are now freely on sale here in the United Kingdom. Who would have thought it? Now, you're there at Breitbart News, and I must, before we get to the heart of this, I think, very important story, we must talk about JD Vance. JD Vance, author of Hillbilly Elegy, a book that sold in huge numbers, a book that actually showed the disconnect that was taking place between the big cities on the coasts and middle America. And JD Vance, somebody that I've met many, many times myself, he won the primary in Ohio last night. For those that don't know, he's going to be the Republican candidate running for Senate. He had been miles behind the other candidates. And then 3 weeks ago, a guy called Donald J. Trump endorsed him, and he won it. So, Emma Jo, reflections and thoughts, please, on JD Vance's victory and the present power that Donald Trump enjoys amongst Republican supporters.
Yeah, I mean, this was a fascinating race because, like you said, JD was struggling throughout most of the campaign, and then all of a sudden, Donald Trump swoops in and made that endorsement, which I think was absolutely brilliant and a perfect endorsement for Trump, a perfect fit for him. He did a rally for JD, and just he took off. He absolutely took off, and it goes to show that this is still Trump's party. You know, the GOP, the Republican Party, is not going back to its establishment ways. It's not. The voters are not ready for that, and they don't want that, and they still want somebody who is going to fight for their interests, which often clash with the interests of the establishment, you know, of Washington, because that city and the Beltway in general, even in New York, is so far removed from the reality and the life of the voters and the people in the rest of the country. And Ohio, I think, is going to be a really interesting race because JD is now in the general election going to be running against a politician who has been in politics for 20 years, Tim Ryan, the Democrat, and he has presided over Ohio, especially the state that JD is running in, being absolutely decimated by the globalist economic policy, by exporting, manufacturing jobs to China, by, focusing on a corporate-centric, bottom-line-centric economic policy, an economic policy that was devised on Wall Street. And I think that JD is really going to go for that in Trump form and really hit him on that and ask him to answer for the last 20 years where Ohioans have been so hurt.
Yeah, and he does bring some real intellectualism, I think. And, you know, if he wins, he'll bring it into the Senate with him. No, it's been very, very interesting. Now, Emma Jo, in a previous incarnation, there you were at the New York Post. It's October 2020. There's a really big election going on for the presidency. And a laptop emerges from a character called Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden. Just give us a brief resume, Emma Jo, of what was found on that laptop and what you chose to put on the front page of the New York Post.
Yeah, so I obtained the laptop really like just about 4 weeks before voting day. And there are hundreds of thousands of documents on this computer. They're all disorganized. You know, this is somebody else's personal computer. They're not going to be, you know, necessarily cataloged in an easily accessible way. And obviously his business is mixed in with his personal life and mixed in with all kinds of other things and his subscriptions and whatever. So this is a huge trove of documents that I got. And we were kind of under the gun to A, verify their authenticity, and B, find the things that were newsworthy. So you're going through it, and Hunter has so much business all over the world and so much business everywhere, some of which, you know, we already knew about, that Peter Schweitzer had previously reported on and that the New York Post had previously reported on. And then you have to parse through that to find the stuff that we didn't previously know. So I had guidance from my then editor-in-chief, where we were talking about what are we going to publish? What are we looking for here? And she said, I know that Hunter Biden is a consultant. That's not news. I know that he's sketchy even. That's not news. I want to know how deep does this go? You know, let's break a story that is going to be really something that the world has never seen before. So I took that advice and I went onto the hard drive and I started looking through the Burisma documents, because Joe Biden had previously said that he had a Ukrainian official fired because of investigations of Burisma. So I wanted to know what was the more intimate details of that story. So I started looking through the Burisma contacts, and lo and behold, I found the first story, which you know, your producers have put up on screen. That was that cover that said, "Thank you for the opportunity to meet your father."
So let's just recap that for those that are not on this story. So basically, you've got Hunter Biden is doing business in Ukraine. He is earning $50,000 to $80,000 a month, working for an oil and gas company despite having no experience in the industry whatsoever. And the contacts within that company met with the then Vice President of the United States of America. Is that about it?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Aside from that, we also uncovered on the hard drive, which we also published in side stories that day, that and imagine that this is a sidebar story, but that, you know, the White House was leaking conference calls to Burisma. The White House was leaking documents to Burisma through a PR company that was hired by Hunter Biden on behalf of Burisma on the U.S. side. So there was just heaps of corruption. What appears to be corruption, you know, with regard to Hunter, this Ukrainian company Burisma, and Joe Biden, implicating Joe Biden directly. And that was the first tranche of stories. And then on the second day, we uncovered the CEFC deal, and we published that on the second drop, which was that Hunter, the infamous line, Hunter will hold 10% equity in a company in partnership with the Chinese Communist Party, 10% for the big guy, who Joe Biden.
The big guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you published that story, and then there was a Russia link as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, that actually wasn't uncovered by the New York Post. That was uncovered by the Senate committee. The Republicans in the Senate did a big deep dive and investigation into Hunter and his business, and they uncovered that Hunter had received a $3 million payment from the widow of the mayor of Moscow. You can't make it up.
Astonishing stuff. Well, you really can't make it up. But Emma Jo, here's the really important part of this story. So great journalism, you know, from you guys at the New York Post and others in revealing all of this, and it gets published. But then it appears to just disappear as a story. And from what I can see of it, and you were involved directly, the rest of mainstream media refused to cover it, and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all our friends on the West Coast just literally buried this story. Is that about what happened?
Yeah, so that was what ended up becoming the real scandal. Is when I went to sleep on the night of October 13th, the night before we published our first story of 2020, I thought that I was going to deliver a story about what appeared to be corruption by one man and his family, Joe Biden. And what I realized very soon in the morning of October 14th, the day that we published, was that this was actually going to be a story of corruption, not of one man, but of an entire system of players, including the security state, including big tech, including the legacy media, and including the Democratic Party, a conspiracy among those parties to protect that man and his family.
And Emma Jo, what I've seen over the last few weeks are the New York Times and others now acknowledging that the stories you wrote were actually correct.
So they're doing kind of a funny thing. They are saying, they're acknowledging that the laptop is authentic, but they won't go as far. They're stopping just short of acknowledging the reporting by the New York Post, which is very strange, but they're making a distinction between the laptop and that authenticity and the authenticity of the reporting based on the laptop in the New York Post. They still don't want to go so far as to implicate Joe Biden or to acknowledge that